Hey everyone, welcome back to the Branding Your Business podcast. My name is Praise Santos McKenna. I'm the founder of the branding studio Come Plum. We know that you all follow entrepreneurs, but sometimes we don't get into the nitty gritty of things. And when I got connected to Eden, I just was like, how does this girl on the other side of the country see the world very similarly to how I see it? And yet there are so many nuances. So we're going to dive into some juicy stuff today with Eden. But let me tell you a little bit about her. Eden is a photographer, coach, and massive advocate for quitting your corporate job. If you needed to hear that, pause right now, quit it, come back, and going all in on your entrepreneurial dreams. She started as a destination wedding photographer turned business coach who now leads other creative entrepreneurs in building a life filled with artistic growth, wealth, and freedom. There's so much alignment here because we talk a lot about the podcast of, hey, there are going to be really practical tools about branding and business you'll hear here. But if you're not building also a life you really love, then what's the point? And so we care about you holistically, both your personal life and professional life. And we have someone today on the show who gets that too. Eden, thank you so much for being with us here today. I know I shared a little bit of your story, but no one really just like overnight becomes a destination photographer and the next night then becomes a business coach. Also, living kind of in two cities too. Can you tell us some of the turning points in your entrepreneurial journey and maybe even how it coincided with some of the turning points in some of your personal life too?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on. It's so lovely to meet you. I'm so happy to be here. My entrepreneurial journey has been what feels like a really long one. I'm not 30 yet, but I've been doing it for 10 years. So it's been my entire adult life. So even though 10 years is not the longest time in the world, I'm like, it's a third of my life, which is crazy. I've loved it. There's been lots of different facets and lots of different chapters. I was super lucky. I grew up with really artistic parents. My mom is an art teacher, my dad's a graphic designer. So we were always really encouraged to pursue the arts. And I fell in love with photography as a kid in my junior high photography class. And even before that, I was the kid on like the elementary school playground, like stealing my parents' point and shoot and carrying it everywhere, like everywhere. And so in high school, my mom bought me a little like kit camera from Costco, one of those like I'm sure like $200 bundles with like the little like lens, like so cute. At the time felt like the biggest camera you could ever have in your career as like a 17-year-old. And I was living in Utah, and so I just kind of fell into weddings. I started my journey trying out lots of different forms of photography and yeah, fell into weddings because weddings is a huge industry in Utah. People get married often, they get married young. And so that's kind of how I got into weddings. And I'm really fortunate that I started my career kind of before the Instagram algorithm was even a thing, really. Like I was there in the beginning where you could have 5,000 followers but get 10,000 likes on a photo, which is crazy. Like I remember getting 10,000 likes on a photo, which is insane. So unfathomable now. But that was back when I started my career. And so it very quickly like picked up. I was getting requested to shoot in lots of different states, which is how my destination portfolio picked up. And then as my career went on, it was probably around 2019, 2018, really, I was starting to get asked a lot to offer like mentorships. And so I started out with like hourly mentorships. I hosted a couple workshops for fellow photographers, which was really cute. And then in 2019, that is when my life and career completely shifted. I launched a series of online offers. I had launched a Pinterest course earlier in 19 and a harsh lighting course. And then in fall, October of 2019, I launched my artificial lighting course. And I launched that in the middle of October. And it was the biggest launch I've ever had. I earned like $40,000 off this one launch within like a week or two. And I went home the next week, and I had gotten married very young. I had gotten married like right after my 20th birthday. I was raised Mormon. And that week I also decided to get a divorce. And that all happened within a week. And so obviously 2020 was a big year for absolutely everyone, but it was even more chaotic because I was in the process of a divorce right as the pandemic happened. I packed up all my things and I moved to Los Angeles from Utah. And I really found myself in this state of like reevaluating not only my personal life, but my career as well. I had been a wedding photographer full time for years at that point, and all weddings got canceled or rescheduled because of the pandemic. And so I was sitting in LA, quarantined alone for the first time since, I met my ex when I was in high school. So this was like truly my first time being an adult on my own. And I had this opportunity to really be like, okay, like my entire life is changing right now. Absolutely everything. Like we are at rock bottom. Like we have cleared down to the foundation. So like what do I want my life to look like, including my career? And all of my weddings were again canceled or rescheduled. And so I had this opportunity to look at my business and be like, we have to rebuild it in some way. So let's make sure that it is completely aligned and it's where I want like my heart and soul to be right now. And weddings were understandably feeling a little bit hard in the middle of a divorce. And I was feeling really excited and passionate about the education side of things since I had just launched those courses. And so I was like, this is something that I can really give a go and like give a go in a really unique way because my weddings are canceled or rescheduled. So like I have nothing to do. We're all sitting at home. We're all quarantining. Like let me try out this new facet of my business. And so I did a lot of really low ticket, like very accessible offerings because again, it was during the pandemic and it was really important to me that things were accessible to people during such a scary time. Like economically, like we were all freaking out obviously in 2020. I don't have to go into details there, but like that was super important to me, and that really started my education and coaching journey, and I've been doing it full time ever since, which was like four and a half years ago now, which is crazy.
Whoa. Yeah. I feel like everyone has their war stories of the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic and what was going on in their life too. And it's always so interesting to hear like, okay, here were our expectations at the end of 2019. We were going to go and do this thing. And we also have to recognize, Eden, our 20s are such a beautiful shifting time, and you had so many transitions happening at the same time while your whole environment was also shifting too. And what's really beautiful is that you took that time to sit down with yourself and say, okay, a lot of people, and I give grace, and it's totally a valid experience to be like, okay, I will completely shut down now because everything else is ending. You took the time to sit down and say, okay, we have to rebuild. There are some circumstances in my life that I could go in interesting directions now where things are pointing to, the circumstances are pointing to here. And you decided to build a business that was really aligned. And that's what we love to talk about here on the podcast is for us, a brand is really about knowing what your values are and building a business around that. And so what was that like? What was it like sitting with yourself? I imagine young Eden in LA with like a journal, looking outside the window and like asking herself big questions? Or was it a little more systematic than that? Was it more also magical than that? What was that process like really checking in with yourself?
Yeah, I think like it was a combination of all things. Like one of the things that I really preach in my business now is like system, strategy, and soul. And I think that our business is a combination of all three of those things. And it's really important that we work with them in equilibrium because I think they can't uphold a truly fulfilling business like without one of those aspects. Like it's so important that our brand is soul led and intuitive and reflective of who we are as human beings. But then we also need systems to have, an ease of flow and a workflow with our clients and ourselves. And we need strategy, we need data. We want to make sure that our efforts are actually going to go the distance and that we're putting our time into things that are actually productive and useful. And so I would say when I was really identifying how I wanted to move my business forward, it was so much internal work. And I really have just been on this like journey for the last, oh my gosh, it's been 5 years now, which is crazy. But like this last 5 years, it's really, I think what my divorce taught me, and a divorce specifically going into the pandemic where so many things were shifting, is I was like, okay, my life was somewhat planned out for me. Like I thought I was going to be a wife and a wedding photographer for the rest of my life. And now I'm not. Like I'm just not those things. And so already I had this proof of myself being able to do something that was unexpected. Like I was like, okay, I've survived that. Like this is my rock bottom and I'm like still alive and I'm still kicking. And so like I can take that energy into this next stage of my business and truly make anything work that I want to, as long as it's aligned. So I had a lot of faith in myself. And I think one thing that really propelled me forward was just experimentation. And that's always been a really huge thing for me in my life and in my business, is the willingness to listen to my intuition and experiment and be okay with things failing, to be okay with things succeeding, to be okay with things pivoting, because that's truly what life is about. And like you said, in our 20s especially, it's crazy how much change happens. Like truly every year is so different. And it's it's uncomfortable in the beginning, that process of experimentation. And it's now like one of my favorite things in the world. Like I love trying new things in my life and business because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is either not going to work out, which is totally fine. Like I've survived things not working out before, or this could be insane. Like this could be so magical. Like my life now, both my business and my personal life, are lives that like I couldn't have even pictured or imagined. Like I did not dream of the life I have now. I didn't even know it was possible, and in the best way. And like how beautiful is it that I was able to build it, and I was only able to build it by being really experimental and really listening to my intuition and really like almost surrendering to like what is supposed to come for me and just trusting that process and like keeping one foot in front of the other even when times are tough, that like it is eventually going to come out in the wash and I will figure it out as I go along.
Yeah, that's huge. Surrender, or I was getting the picture of just you were open handed of like, okay, we're going to try these things. I could just like stay back in fear because all these things are new, or we could just see what happens. I've already hit rock bottom, which sounds like it's a bad thing, but what a gift because it gave you so much more confidence. Like, if this is the worst it can get, I survived. I'm fine. Let's try more things. It made you a risk taker. It helped
Mhm.
you try out these things, which it's so much of the work. I love what you said about systems and strategy, and we can talk about that. You all can Google a lot of the things that I teach, what Eden teaches. There's some strategies out there that are well known. And yet it's some of these softer skills of like, okay, do you know how to follow your intuition? Do you know even what your gut, your mind, and body is telling you to do? Also, do you know how to talk to that part of yourself that is living in fear, acknowledging it? And also at the same time, reminding yourself of the truth. Like, will I fail? Because I've tried things and I've actually done really well in them too. It's these softer mindset, intuition skills that I think really add so much color to entrepreneurial life, to our personal life too. And it sounds like even when you're describing your upbringing of having these more artistic parents, I imagine they instilled in you a lot of these things, whether on purpose, right? Like, oh, Eden, we're
Mhm.
having a conversation, or even the way they just live their lives and encourage your dreams too. It's yeah, in your opinion, has it been nature or nurture that has helped you think this way, tap into the part of you that can surrender, or has it been something else?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I think it's a little bit of both. I am so fortunate that I grew up with just a powerhouse of a mother. She was a single mom for several years when I was a child, and then married my stepdad, who I refer to as dad. But she was a powerhouse, like working mom when she was single. She was the sole provider when I was growing up as well, through the economic crash of like 2008. Like she's always been like our family's big provider, and she's always been the hardest worker I know. And so I am so lucky, so grateful, so fortunate that especially like, I mean, you probably know, it's like back in the early 2000s and like the 90s, like a working mother was not the norm. It's definitely like becoming more of a normalized thing. But like, I didn't have any friends whose mom works. Like, they were all stay-at-home moms when I grew up in Utah, especially. That's a very conventional and traditional area. And so I think that nurture really, even unintentionally, like I can't remember a time that my mom like sat me down and explicitly was like, being a working mom is so cool and different and you should do it. Like, but I just had this powerful example of like, yeah, women can be a lot of things and women can work really hard and women can provide for themselves and their family. Yeah. And so it's never been a question in my mind, even growing up as a really conservative Christian in a really conservative place. Like, it's never been a question in my mind that like I, as a woman and maybe even a wife one day, or a mother if I choose that path, like can provide and have something really amazing going for me. So I'm really lucky in that state. I'm also like, I always tell people, I'm like, I'm an eldest daughter, I'm divorced, I'm a Sagittarius Capricorn rising, I'm an Enneagram 1. Like, it is programmed in me a little bit to like be a hard worker and like to show up for things in a really passionate, intense way. So I think that that combination between like my mother and just like my personality in general is like very, very intense, very passionate. I don't really do things half-heartedly. Like, I'm just not going to do it if I'm not passionate about it. And that's really fueled my businesses in their path.
Shout out to Eden's mom. Like, thank you. Yes, I had to mute myself, but my snaps were here. I'm like, yes, women can do this. I love to hear that. I love to hear that that was an example in your life too. It's interesting being a coach because people are choosing you to be a role model in their life and to speak into their life as they're looking for direction and encouragement and strategy and soul and systems and how they all connect. How have you seen your relationship with the people you coach? Has it been like a nature and nurture then too? Is it kind of like you rubbed off on them because it's explicit, like you tell them like, hey, this strategy for launching an online course works? Or has it been a mix of them also seeing you launch things? Or has it been hard to determine how your coaching style has affected them?
Ooh, I love that question as well. So I think one of my favorite things about coaching is how different every single experience is. Such a foundational principle of my business and coaching style is that your business and your brand and every touch point with your clients, like every touch point within your business should be a reflection of you. Because I truly believe that's how you both make the most money and you find the most personal fulfillment. And I think both of those are just as important as one another. And so, because it's so personal to each client in each business, each experience is so different. And I love that. I love having my hands in lots of different projects. So, being a coach is so fun for me because I have so many personality types that I'm engaging with constantly, which is so much fun. I found that within coaching, especially right now where we're in a space where coaching is getting really popular, right? Like, a lot of people are moving down this funnel into the educational space, which is very exciting. I think that something that we need to talk about more and that I try really hard to talk to my consultations about before I even start coaching someone is like, coaching at the end of the day is going to be so nuanced to who you are, but there's one common thread through all of it, which is that I can't fix your business, but I'm going to teach you how to fix it for yourself. And I think that's the thing that people really need to keep in mind when they're investing in anything in themselves, like a coach or an online course or things like that, is like, unless you're hiring someone as an employee that's going to actually do the work for you, you're going to have to do it, and you're going to have to be vulnerable and speak up into what feels aligned to you and what doesn't, right? Because there's so many strategies, there's so many ways to show up. None of them are right or wrong. Well, there are some wrong ones, but like, as a general concept, like there's lots of ways of doing things that work. And so, just as we have to show up very vulnerably and very intentionally with our clients as a coach, our clients also have to show up very intentionally with us. And that's been a really big shift in my coaching lately over the last couple months, is taking the time to do the like personal and subconscious and conscious work alongside the business systems and strategy. Because I found that there was a period in my coaching and my business where people knew what to do, but they just didn't want to do it, or they like couldn't bring themselves to do it. And so rather than just quickly pivoting to something else, I've really taken this transition into like, okay, when that comes up for you, let's talk about it. Like, let's dig deep. Let's do some introspection. Let's talk about the emotions coming up. Like, why don't we want to do this? Like, what's blocking us from taking these steps? What's taking us away from following this path or reaching our goals? Because a lot of times, I would almost argue most of the time, we do know what to do. We're just having a really hard time doing it. And so I found that work is so integral to people meeting their goals and bettering their business, is to really do the introspection on a deep, deep level to find what is aligned and what feels fulfilling and exciting for their business.
Yeah, that is really insightful because people are a lot smarter and wiser than they give themselves credit for. And
Mhm.
yet, sometimes we need a mirror or someone we give permission in our lives to call us out a little bit of, hey, you actually know how to do XYZ. And what is the real question that you're asking? Or what is the question we should be asking instead is what is actually holding me back? Is there a pattern? And what is the fear there? When am I afraid it's gonna happen? Am I self-sabotaging myself? Again, it's these softer skills that we need to pair with the bigger strategic skills too. But that's actually so essential and maybe more foundational before getting into it too, which thank you. I love a little alliteration with systems, strategy, and soul. Do you feel like you in your coaching these days, now that you've been doing it for a number of years, do you do one before the other? Are they all kind of happening at the same time? What is their relationship like? Can you have in some seasons two and then you kind of like put one on the
Mm.
back burner? Do you always need all three? In your experience from your personal life and from coaching others, how have those three been in relationship with each other?
Ooh, I love that. So I would say that like in my approach, both in my business and with my coaching, I think it's so important for all three to be present. That being said, I think there are times that one takes the back burner a little bit or is like less important to us. The one thing that I always start with and will always start with, I would be shocked if there's ever a time that this isn't the primary thing that I start with, is soul. Because I think that our personal fulfillment and our personal alignment with our brand and business is truly at the foundation of every other thing within our business. Like, it is going to fuel our client experience. It's going to fuel what we can charge. It's going to fuel our relationships with our clients. It's going to fuel what our to-do list looks like. And even the way that we answer emails, right? Like, I am so passionate about having a beautiful life. Like, there's an automatic responder on my email and has been for years that it's going to take me up to 72 hours to get back to you. And that's just the way it is. And if that's a problem for people when they're thinking about working with me, we're probably not going to be a good fit. And that's okay. Like, I would rather us figure that out before you pay me money. And so it's so important to me that we focus on that soul first and we get that totally aligned. I think there was a period in my business, like there's been periods where each system, strategy, and soul have held equal weight. Like, they've all been really balanced in the way that they're showing up in my business. But like, I went through a period where I really let systems take the charge. Like, it was when I first moved to New York, and I was booking a lot, and I was balancing a lot of clients, and I was balancing a lot of social media work. And so having everything super systemized and scheduled out at least like a month in advance was such a huge thing for me. Like, I would have my social media mapped out, planned, scheduled a month in advance, podcast episodes recorded. Like, I was so ahead of schedule at all times. And that was really foundational for me at that period in my life. Right now, my systems still flow in terms of like my client workflows and things like that. But like, I post on social media when I feel called to that day. Like, I wake up and if I feel like posting, I'm going to post. And if I don't feel like posting, I'm not going to. Like, I do not schedule out my social media right now. And that's because I've been taking a much more soulful approach to my business. I've been really kind of shifting and rethinking and doing a lot of introspection on what I want this next chapter to look like in my business, especially as I'm like approaching 30. I just moved to a new city. Like, I'm like, this is a great opportunity to do a check-in on like how aligned things feel and how things can feel more aligned. And so like right now I'm leading with soul so much more than I'm leading with systems. And that's okay. Like, there's no right or wrong. There's pros and cons to both. it's again just a level of experimentation to be like, what feels best for me right now? How does that affect my sales? How does that affect my clients, right? That's data that I can build strategy on. But just treating it as an experiment where I get to look at the data later, both personally and for my business, to see how fulfilled I feel and that affects my life, right? Like sometimes I'm okay with earning less money. Like when I lived in New York and my rent was $3,600 a month, I was really chugging along. Like that was when I needed to be hitting very distinct numerical goals in my business. Whereas right now, my cost of living is less than half than what it used to be in New York. And so it's like I get to kind of focus on my personal life a little bit more and really slow down and be like, let me go to the beach and journal about what I want work to look like this week. Whereas like in New York, that was crazy. Could not do that. It was like every second you're going. So yeah, sorry, that was a very long answer to your question. But yeah, I think it ebbs and it flows. And I think that's the beauty of being self-employed. Like we get to give ourselves that gift that like we truly are in control of what things look like.
Yes, and no need to apologize because I love to keep it real here on the podcast of this is also, yes, the gift of entrepreneurship is being able to make sure your business works for your life and that you're not living to work in your business. Then why did you start working for yourself in the first place if you're just going to be without freedom? And you're the one now stripping yourself of that freedom too. But we also have to acknowledge I work with a lot of folks who really want to start a business, but for them it's not like, okay, I'm quitting tomorrow. Like, hey, I am the top income provider in our family and I have two kids who go to school. And so for them, their life circumstances are a little different, right? And everyone has to acknowledge that your circumstances give you the data to make the decisions of what you need to do with your business at that time. Also, the one constant in life is that it's not constant. And so it's going to change. The circumstances are going to change, and even our business is going to change. The market that really needed the thing we provided or we really solved the problem for, it's probably evolving and we have to shift. It's that skill set of being flexible and responding to the circumstance that's in front of you right now is the skill set. It's leadership. It's being able to, again, be open handed and surrender. Maybe it should be system, strategy, soul, and surrender. It's like your bonus
No,
fourth
literally.
thing to just like go with the flow because even now you were a destination wedding photographer, you became a business coach, and I know you still shoot a bit too and you have so many other cool businesses under you too, but now it seems like you're sensing again there's like another interesting nuance shift, and it's not that you have the answers, but it sounds like kind of you're back in it again of okay, what does it look like, what is this feeling like, and can you describe that to people now that we're talking about the present and not in the past, what it feels like? Do you feel a pressure when you wake up in the morning? I know that there are times in my life where I'm more anxious and uncertainty is unsettling. And there's sometimes where I don't know if it's like my hormones are more in balance or I slept really well the night before that I can deal with it better. But what does your life look like in this transition? Are you waking up like really eager to figure it out, or are you just like it'll show itself more? Or yeah, can you give us some color of this season in your life right now?
Yeah, I think how it manifests for me and the way that I always talk to my audience and clients about it as well as like an identifier that you need to do the introspection and like start processing your business a little bit more intuitively is if you feel burnout or you feel out of alignment. Like there's always going to be things in our business that we don't love doing. Like, do I like doing my bookkeeping? Absolutely not. Like, but generally the actual work that I do, whether that's photography or coaching or design or whatever it is, like if I'm not feeling excitement for that most of the time, something's off. Like that means that something's off. Sometimes we'll have a bad client or something like that, and it's okay for things to feel off for a moment. But like if you're meeting your general business and showing up in it and producing as anything less than exciting, then something's gone out of alignment. And I think that's something that's super easy to get frustrated with. I know there's been times this has really been happening for like the last year for me. And there's been times where I've been really frustrated of like, why can't I get my mindset back into this thing that I used to love or used to really bring me joy? Like, what is going on? But instead, like, yes, hold space for frustration for a moment, but then be like, okay, how can I get curious about this? Like, what is going on here? what would feel exciting, right? And I've done a lot of shifting in the last 5 years as a human being, but especially in my time in New York, specifically like the last year and a half, where I used to be very introverted. I used to be very shy. I used to be pretty private, which is so funny meeting people now. There's literally no way that you used to be like that, because I'm like so loud, super extroverted, like hosting parties is my favorite thing in the world. I love meeting new people. Like I'm a completely different person than I was 5 years ago. And a lot of that came from living in New York and really finding myself and finding my people. And like I was having a conversation with someone about it the other day. Like I got so comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that was one of my favorite things about living in New York City. Everything you've heard about it is true. If you're ever thinking about moving to New York City, like it will chew you up and spit you out in the best way, but like you will leave a different person than the one that arrived. And I think that's really beautiful. It's like a furnace for that. And I really pushed myself to get uncomfortable. I went to networking events. I remember distinctly the first time I went to a party that I knew no one at. And I just like my neighbor invited me and I was like, I nearly threw up. Like I was so nervous. And I never hosted events. And I really just like got into this habit of being like, this is going to suck for a second, but like, let me see what I can bring out in myself by making myself super uncomfortable. And so over the last year and a half, I've found myself really shifting into this like very extroverted, community driven person. That's where a lot of my passion lies right now. Like it's hard to engage in my socials and or meet me as a person without me mentioning community and like community gatherings in some capacity. Like it is my favorite thing in the world right now. I've been obsessed with it. And so that's really shaping the way that I'm approaching my business right now. And it's been a slower few months. I got really burnt out. Like I said, that's one of like my big identifiers that something's out of alignment. And for the last year, I've just been feeling really burnt out with my work. And I've just kind of given myself the space to sit in that and like try things and be like, okay, what feels good? Like, or what about this felt good? What didn't feel good about this? And truly the thing that I've found continually popping up for me is this sense of community and this sense of introspection and leaning into our intuition to identify what next steps are. And so I've really been brainstorming on like how to bring that into my business more, and it's definitely still coming about. And I would say I'm trying to approach it with a similar approach of like open arms, open hands, of like, please show me, universe, like what this path is, like please give me an opportunity to manifest this. But yeah, it's already shaped itself quite a bit. And like I just launched a new coaching program that is like much more intuitively and personal work based than ever before, which is something I'm really loving. And I'm getting to know my clients in a it feels more like a relationship than it does like me talking to them about strategy or about business. Like it's this dynamic that is really beautiful. So it fulfills that sense of community as well. So yeah, I would say like right now I'm giving myself the grace to approach things day by day and to not get alarmed by the feelings that come up, but instead just treat them as data that I can analyze and get intuitive about and get curious about. And yeah, and I think like not everyone has that. I'm extremely privileged that I can take on less work right now, or that I can like slow down sales and take the space to do that. Like that is a huge privilege. And like not every stage of my life would I have been able to do that. But I also have like sacrificed things in order to do that. Like I don't my style of living has changed in the last year. I moved out of New York City and finances were a big part of that. Like I was like, I'm so stressed out when my cost of living is 5K a month. Like I would rather like live somewhere somewhat cheaper, or like still a city, but like I would rather like try something new and see like how my dynamic with stress changes, like when I'm living in a city that's a little less intense. So yeah, I think just like doing the introspection on like what's coming up for you. Are there sacrifices you can make in order to make things more aligned? Like really, really go into each of your decisions and analyze each of your emotions with this idea of how can I be further in alignment? How can I further connect with myself and my clients and the people that I love?
That is so good. In stand-up comedy, they do a callback, right? Like something they said at the beginning, they like weave it through. And you said this earlier on, and that when you coach people, you tell them that so much of their personal life should be injected into their brands and businesses, and to make sure you build businesses that are a reflection of you. And you are such a good example of reminding people that we are dynamic people and our businesses will be dynamic as well. And I love your reminders of tuning in. Hey, what are the things that are taking away your energy? And what are the things that are giving you energy right now in this season? Because I know that you are so passionate about your work. And yet there were some parts of your work that just were burning you out. And you were more introverted before. And maybe that's where you got your energy before. But then there are shifts. You became a different person. Shout out also to New York, Eden's mom in New York. Now you are like, community is really what's exciting, even as you talk about it, what you're creating is beautiful and different and more in alignment with what you are. Even though I know you're like, I don't have all the answers, you're way closer than you were a month ago, a year ago. And it's so interesting because community, like AI, is also a really big buzzword right now in business, and that big corporate tech companies understand the need for community for the bottom line. And so they're hiring community managers, they're doing these things, and they are hiring a person who gets people and who gets like the human need for connection. And there are some who are just following like a soulless playbook of just like, this is part of our strategy to retain customers and make more money too. And so it's really interesting right now how you're talking about community as a product of introspection, a product of, hey, I saw that this really lit me up in my personal life. And I imagine people need the same sense of connection in the programs I teach, in the courses I have, and integrating that in all together. Can you tell us what kind of innovative things in community you've been creating? How has community shown itself in really tactical ways to you today? Is it more dinner parties? Is it more open-ended questions in your coaching programs? What is that looking like?
Ooh, I love this. So really like what shifted for me, and I would actually say it like happened this year. Well, actually there's a smaller thing and I've been doing it for 3 years. I'll start there. And it sounds so silly, but I have this really ugly hat. It's like a holographic cowboy hat that was advertised as a bucket hat that I bought like 4 years ago. And it's turned into this apartment tradition where every single person that steps foot in my apartment, like literally anyone that comes into my home, we take a Polaroid of them in the hat and it goes on the wall. And it has become like, it sounds so silly, but I like almost cry about it sometimes, or like I'll cry looking at the wall because I get to look at this wall of all these people that mean so much to me, even in small ways, right? Like there are people on that board I'll never see again, or those people that came into my house once. But it's this really beautiful reminder of like, these are people that I brought together. These are people that have been in a space that I've purposefully curated. These are people that I've connected with in some way. They've fulfilled my life in some way. And one of my favorite things is taking the photo of them and they get to hang themselves up on the cork board. And I just hosted a party the other night, and like literally one of my favorite parts of my parties is taking these photos and then watching everyone look at the board. Like not a singular person doesn't spend at least 5 minutes on the board pointing into people they know, like taking it in. They always take photos of themselves on the board. And it's just become like this really beautiful, fulfilling thing to like see the board grow, see all these souls that I bring into my space and bring into my life, and to make them also feel like they're a part of something bigger, even just for a moment. And that's like one of my favorite aspects of it is it's such a small way to make someone feel like they're a part of my life and my community, and they are. And so that's been like a really beautiful thing for me that's become really fulfilling. And then like alongside that, I've become a big hoster of parties. And one thing that's especially important to me, like I love parties and house parties in general, but I came out as queer 4 years ago now. But queer community is so important to me, and queer community can be so beautiful. And I think everyone has an aspect of their life that like they can connect with other people on. on in queerness is that for me, right? Like I'm never going to talk to a mom the way that another mom is going to talk to a mom. Like we're going to have really huge life differences. And that doesn't mean we won't get along and have a beautiful relationship, but like there's something so beautiful about connecting to people that have a really big aspect of their life in common. And so I've become like a big hoster of these lesbian parties that we like host once a month. And it has been one of the like most fulfilling things of my life to fill my home with queer joy and queer humans, and to watch them build friendships with each other. I've seen relationships form in my home. I've seen deep, long-lasting friendships form in my home. And it's just been the extremely beautiful gift, honestly. Like it is my favorite aspect in my life, is bringing people together to connect with one another. And it's been such a huge principle for me that I can then look at and be like, how can I take these principles and bring them into my business? How can I throw business events where everyone feels like they're a part of something, where they're excited to show up, they're excited to meet the fellow members of their community, they do have something in common that is really beautiful. I think another great example of this is like there's a book, which I haven't read actually. I've only listened to podcast episodes about it. I need to read the book. It's like crazy how much I wreck it when I haven't read it, but it's called The Art of Gathering.
Shout out to Priya Parker. Yes, you'll
Mm-hmm.
love it. Please, yes, read
I
it.
need, yeah, I absolutely need to read it because I've only listened to podcast episodes about it. But one of her principles is, that there has to be a common theme or a commonality or purpose to your gatherings that isn't just a gathering. Like it's not just let me bring people together or let me have people come to dinner. And she like tells the story of like moms that had a huge dinner party, and the rule was that if they talked about their kids, they had to drink, they had to take a shot. And I loved that. This idea that like, yeah, you all have something really beautiful in common, but what can you talk about past that? Like how can you get to know each other in this concept that isn't that? Like I think it'd be so beautiful and fun to like host a work party where it's like you're not allowed to talk about your pricing and you're not allowed to talk about the state of your bookings. Like how about we don't talk about those things? How about we get to know like the purpose behind our businesses, and we get to talk about the passion we have for our craft and our clients? Like how would that really shape a work dynamic and a work community if we weren't talking about numbers as much? Like how could we fulfill each other and uplift each other if we got to bond on that common ground? And so I wouldn't say that I have found exactly how I'm going to manifest those things in my business yet. I'm still very much like brainstorming and trying to be really intentional on the ways that I can bring community together in my business. But it's a great place to start. Like it's been really beautiful. Even just the concept of like, I love hosting parties because I love getting to know people better in a really chill environment and like low pressure environment. That's even changed like the way that I show up in my coaching sessions one-on-one, of just like how can I get to know this person outside of their business or like outside of their work, and then we can pull those concepts into their work later. But like how can I just connect with them as a human being, and we can really identify what those points are before we move into anything work related.
Yeah, it sounds like you are so good in your personal life. I love the picture of this bucket hat that's actually a cowboy hat that has a hologram on it, but it's this rule and tradition that you have that people recognize and engage in. And there's a collective we when that happens. And Priya talks about this in her book. And Eden, you're going to love it. She also talks about not only having a clear purpose, clear beginning and end, but also having these like guidelines or rules and traditions, because people want to understand what the boundaries are. And it's that sense of humanity when you bring in these more fun traditions into spaces that make people feel more seen and connected. And even what you described with your queer community, everyone has a life experience that you could connect people to, and that feeling of empathy and sympathy and overall that sense of belonging when you can be in a room, whether a virtual room, a IRL room, and have that sense of belonging. People can feel that. People can feel that layer of connectedness. So I'm really excited as people listen to the podcast. They'll be like, maybe that's when Eden didn't realize what her hologram hat was, but now she knows what it is in her business. So this hopefully will be a little prophetic and a little like future looking as we see you discover that and unfold. We are going to end this podcast, which has been so juicy and so good, but we're going to end it with like a fun game. This is
Okay,
one of the
amazing.
traditions we have on the podcast, and it's more like you do have to surrender. And it's like it's not so much winning or losing. I just kind of want to know what's going on in your mind. I'm going to say words, and you're going to say the first thing that pops into your head because of it. No filter. Sound good?
Okay. Terrifying, but
Okay.
great.
Yes, yes. But she does it scared all the time, people. So this should not
Yeah,
be
I'm like, it's
a big
fine. We've
deal.
done scarier things.
Everyone has survived this game, Eden. So we're good.
Amazing.
Okay. Are you ready for your first word or phrase, rather? Okay. This one's easy. New York.
Change.
Election.
Terrifying.
Drink.
Martini.
Color.
Pink.
Vacation.
Hawaii.
Hope.
Myself.
Depth.
Community.
Last one. Ready for this one? Might go really deep. The word is, or the phrase rather, is boy band.
One Direction.
A directioner, a fellow directioner. Love to hear
Yes,
it, Eden.
absolutely. I'm a Harry Styles girly through and through. I love him.
Okay. Love his art direction. Like, what an artiste to be sharing our
hmm
time in the world. And
Nope.
so
Absolutely.
good. Eden, I would love to chat with you so much longer, but you need to read Priya Parker's book. And so we have to wrap it up and end this. But with the nuggets that you shared are going to be so applicable to our listeners because they're really trying to figure out, okay, Praise, you talk a lot about branding and business. How does it tie together? And you gave real life examples of like, hey, here's what it looks like in every different season. And I think your story gives people permission to step back, reevaluate, and take brave steps to continue to align their values, what's important to them, with what their business and overall their life should look like. So, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such an honor. So thank you for having me on the show.